So yeah, so you're saying about, oh, first of all, which thing are you working on right now? Is this the guns or is this the other one?
I just started on red light cameras, just to
Red
get
light
another one
cameras.
begun.
Cool.
It's falling into what I think is going to be a similar pattern where there's some studies that show a net improvement, some that show a net decrease, and meta-analysis that shows mixed results.
So does the meta-analysis already include those studies or not, or do you know?
I'll have to go through and double check which studies were in the meta-analysis to look at. I don't have a lot that's already marked down in the
Yeah.
your table. Most of this was me reading up on it and getting a sense of where things are at.
So yeah, I can give you some theories I have about studies and meta-analyses. Um, from a Golibot standpoint. Um, so if we think the meta-analysis is acceptable for where we are in the debate, um, we can put it in and kind of be done as long as it has all the other studies that we would want to include. At some point, someone's going to say that meta-analysis is wrong for one reason or another. If they're just talking about the whole meta-analysis, like the methods or something like that, then we could put pros and cons underneath the meta-analysis. But I think the debate will end up going to saying, oh, these three studies in there that are dragging the meta-analysis the wrong way from what the person thinks is true are wrong. And so now we need to put the studies, we need to have some way to put claims on those child studies underneath the meta-analysis. And my feeling is that at that point, you really need to like strip out the meta-analysis, put in all the studies that are under the meta-analysis, and then build in the scoring for each individual study. But I haven't thought through all the ramifications of that. So I think in the end, though, it will be, when the debate gets pretty far, it'll be like meta-analysis are analyses are a great place to get all the studies and some analysis of it. But I think in the end, we'll have to have the individual studies and use the information from the meta-analysis to inform the scores for each individual study. So our main claim will kind of be like, not the main claim, but the claim of all those child studies will kind of be like a proxy for the meta-analysis and could mention it, but its score would be derived from all of its child studies that it has in there. Is that making any sense whatsoever?
Yeah,
I'm just brain
that is
dumping.
dependent on our access to the child studies versus the meta-analysis. There's so many paywalls out there. It I also am not convinced that, people when interacting with Golibot will go to the level of, pointing out individual studies that are flawed. I don't think we're gonna have a lot of subject matter experts who are engaging.
I mean, I think 90% of the people won't, but I mean that is debates that I do see on Twitter for the nutrition debates. It's like, oh, look at that. Here's the meta-analysis of like, okay, only one of those tests, like for the keto thing, only one of those studies, the carbohydrate requirements were low enough that they were in ketosis. So you can't say that this meta-analysis, of course, once again, that's to the meta-analysis itself.
Mhm.
So I mean, I guess what would be good is to, yeah, go ahead and I'd go ahead and put the meta-analysis in right now, and then look and see if those studies were included or were not. If you think there's an important study that wasn't included and wasn't then you can put that study at the same level, be a sibling of the meta-analysis. But in that case, the meta-analysis probably holds more weight than that study. So then what we do is we put a claim underneath it and says something to the effect. So that would be an importance claim that would be affecting importance of the meta-analysis, and it would say something like, meta-analysis, this is a meta-analysis and it has more data than the other studies, than the other claims in this section. And then that would, if there's only one, that would just double its strength, and we'd have to talk about, is that enough increased weight over the individual studies? But I think once you kind of get them in there, we could then talk about how we want to express what we think that how they should impact each other. But I would think that if you're finding a study and it's in the meta-analysis, then I don't think we need to include it elsewhere, unless you can think of a reason.
Okay, that answers that side of it. The other side is when we run into that issue where there's just the overall pro, overall con, overall mixed categories, those, like, they could be all responses to each other, but more like, it seems more likely they're just the three prongs of the top level, but I don't think that gets the weighting correct.
Wait, sorry, say that all again? I lost track somewhere.
So we have the main claim, red light cameras are effective for improving traffic safety. Then we would have the three subclaims. Red light cameras do or increase public safety. Red light cameras are mixed at increasing safety. Red light cameras do not increase safety.
So I wouldn't break it down that way, because those are different scales of the same score. So like claims that say it increases should just be a pro underneath the main one, and claims that say it doesn't should be a con. And we need to talk about the ones that give credence that it does neither, because the system doesn't handle that real well right now. But do you kind of agree that the instead of those groupings, that those pros and cons could just be underneath it? The main one, does that kind of make sense, rather than breaking up into three child claims?
I guess in this case, it would be they increase rear end collisions, they decrease right angle collisions, they increase or decrease overall injury levels.
Yeah, so those would be the separate categories. Right. So those are the, like we were talking about, the top level is kind of like, what are the trade-offs? So yeah, although we'd have to decide, is increasing or decreasing injuries, like that's not a trade-off that actually trades off against whether it's from the side or from the front. So I have to think about that. I'd almost have to look, and I don't know, maybe we need to define safety. Is safety injuries? Or I guess if your car gets crumpled, that's still,
Like, it's still a harm, just a financial harm rather than a physical harm if you walk away
right,
safely.
but it's still harm. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, try and tease out what if a study's just talking about, rear end collisions, then yeah, that would be a separate trade-off.
The studies are never just talking about one type of collision. All of them are looking at multiple types, although really it's two primary types.
Well, so I think we just need to then say, are there any studies that have anything to do with trade-offs? Because this may just be, here's a study that says it does, here's a study that says it doesn't, and it may just be a whole list of studies that are made pros and cons, and then we need to figure out how to weigh them.
The significant majority of them I've been saying are about trade-offs. Whether the increase in rear end collisions is outweighed by the decrease in right angle collisions. The place where the numbers flip-flop is whether the overall rate of injury goes up or down.
Right. So I don't think we need to delve into if like, let's just simplify it, say two studies. If both studies are doing that, then we just set them next to each other. We don't need to break their claims apart into the two, because both studies are including them. Maybe we should look at some So you only need to break it up into trade-offs if the data beneath it only addresses one trade-off and not the other. But if they already incorporate all the trade-offs in almost all of them, then you don't need to break it apart. It might just be study, 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 study.
Yeah, I'm just thinking how to organize it then, because we have the one trade-off. Would it just have a bunch of different studies linked to that one? So they're not separate entries, they're just
Well,
links to it?
in this case, we may not have that top level B trade-offs at all. It may just be, we have a whole bunch of studies that say that it increases, that it improves safety or reduces safety. And then we're done. It's not really trade-offs then, it's just competing studies.
Okay, in that case, would we repeat the or claim multiple times to add more weight to that claim?
So what we do is, well, so give me an example.
Basically, if we have 5 studies showing it or discussing both types of crashes and finding a slight net decrease in injuries, would we have just all 5 of those entered separately, or would they all be links onto one their claim that says the same thing?
So let's say we have 5 that say they're due, 5 that say they do, and 2 more that say they don't. Then I would just have all 7 claims grouped up together, 5 pros, 2 cons.
Okay, so like linearly responding to each other, or
No, just all, I'm sorry, all on the same row.
on the same level? Okay, when
Because
said grouped
then
up
you
together,
kind of
I wasn't sure
say,
what
just like someone, if you told someone there were 5 studies that says it does and 2 that says it doesn't, then, or if they say there's 2 studies that do and 1 study does, the person's going to be like, well, my confidence level is not 100% because there's that 1 study that doesn't. And then we could look at the quality of the studies and decide if we want to give one of them more weights than the other. But I would just, I wouldn't group them up, because then if you have 5 that are pro and 2 that are con, if you group them, it would then be 1 versus 1,
Yep.
equal weight, and it'd be 50. But in this case, they're all the same category, all the same thing. And so they just naturally fall into the pros and cons.
Yeah, determining when to repeat their claims versus when to have things reference to the
group
same
them.
claim has not always been clear.
No, and I think if you just step back and say, how should these claims in reality, how do I evaluate the weight of these claims? And you'll want to group them together if the fact that you have more of these shouldn't strengthen the case of the level above it. But if having more does make it better, then they should be all on the same level. So like if you had 5 studies that were all working off the exact same data set, you might choose to group those because that's really the effect of one study. They're not learning anything new. But if it is 5 different studies in different cities and doing different things, that they should all add weight.
Okay.
So
I
yeah,
think that answers.
it's really thinking about how the weights should affect each other's, whether you group or not.
All right, I think that answers that sufficiently for now as well. I did have a question about UX, given that we're now diving into design more thoroughly. Do we want to spend time polishing the current design, or
Not really.
Okay.
If you want to spend a little time exploring it and learning about it, although there is a good chance that we will throw the whole editor away and just start from scratch on the core thing.
sort of the impression I was getting, which may be a little wary of committing much time to it?
Yeah. So yeah, there's probably not much use in even looking at that old code. Yeah. Unless you just want to kind of understand the structure of a reason score. Like if you want to understand the data structure, a good thing to do, share my screen. Coworker is blowing up my Slack.
Something your break.
No, he's just talking probably to other people. So you can actually download. Although, is the download broken? No. Yeah. So if you wanted to see the structure, you could go to reasonscore.com. Keep switching screens. Reasonscore.com. Go down to the play with the example.
It's still just showing a black screen, by the way.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Shared the wrong screen. Screen 2. There we go. Reason Score. If you go to reasonscore.com, there's a play with the example.
Mhm.
Then you can hit download. And that will show. Not that. I mean, it comes in unformatted, but if you, depending on your editor, I'm using Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, I use Studio as well. Shift Alt F.
And then you can kind of, explore the shape of the.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think I have a good visual understanding of the or shape of it. It's more a philosophical question about how we want to consolidate things.
Yeah.
And it definitely matters more when we aren't just pulling from scientific studies, when we're pulling from public debate, since those claims are going to have a whole lot more repetition that doesn't necessarily tie to any new data source for it.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So yeah, as far as UI UX, if we have some time, I might run past you I went ahead, I've written up a kind of proposal of a rewording of a description of the experiment.
Mhm.
I don't think it's bad. Go ahead and get your feedback on it. I got some other people's feedback on it. Unless you have any other questions or anything else for you to be able
I
to
think we
keep
covered
moving
everything.
forward. Okay. Let me find it. Okay. So I did this really long explanation of kind of like all the little details and stuff, but I shared that with my mastermind group, and they said it would be helpful if you had kind of like the big picture also of what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
Anyway, so if we forget all the branding, even that there's a goalie bot, like their bots may not be involved, reason score may not be involved, but if we're just going to start from scratch and first principles, kind of the main problem that we're trying to improve, not solve, is society is polarized and it's hard to get things done. There's other things that I'm solving, but I don't know. We can talk about what the other options are there, but that's one. And then this is an experiment to help people do more together. Kind of the bold part is experiment and just more. It's not solving everything. By building something slightly better than a fact check. So it isn't a fact check. It's something different, but similar. I'm playing with the formatting while I'm talking. And then I'm still not sure if I want to ask this, but it seemed to work out. So why should I trust your fact check?
Mhm.
Quote fact check, because it's not a fact check, but similar. You shouldn't, but here's why you should check it out. And then we talk about some of the benefits of this new thing. We try to incorporate feedback subject to resource constraints. So we're setting the expectations there. More transparent, more transparency, broader and deeper, easy to poke holes in, quicker to understand. And that's probably how far I thought. And then last night, late at night, I was trying to think of what's the person. I think the next thing they're going to ask, or even before some of the stuff, is like, what am I supposed to do with this? So these are really, really half baked. So I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe before we go into that, do you have any, does any of that trigger concerns, or does it seem clear, or what do you think?
The first thing that jumps to mind is that I'm not sure if this works against polarization or if it feeds into it, given that we have things very clearly divided into two camps on every issue. That is a fundamentally polarized approach. The end results should generally be some level of or mixed answer, but if people are just taking away the top level, then we could very easily be feeding polarization rather than defeating it.
Yeah, that is yeah, so I guess that's kind of a valid concern. If we find out that it's increasing polarization, then we'll shut down the experiment. The thought is that, yeah, one of the problems with polarization right now is that people are making straw men of their enemies. And then by showing that the debate itself is more complex, in theory, that should lower the temperature in the room, which should lower the polarization. But yeah, that's definitely some risk, is that we are poking at the differences between different ideologies.
Yeah. The main thing we want to avoid is being in a position where people will look at this as a way to say, this is why you're right, or this is why you're wrong. If that's as far as they tend to go, then that's not going the direction we want it to.
Yeah. Although it's incumbent on the person that's saying, this is, like, if you say, this is why you're wrong, this is why you're right's a problem, but I don't know if I can solve that. But this is why you're wrong to someone else. The onus is on that other person. They have an opportunity to go through the process and correct going by. And that didn't exist, today.
Yeah, which speaks to where we should place emphasis and weights in the design to funnel people towards the parts that we think are most valuable in reducing polarization. And then we see if other values we have are at odds with that.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or impressions when you heard that? Did it sound better than, clearer than what we had previously?
It does sound clearer than what we had previously. We had too much detail in it previously, and it was not emphasizing it at the top level in a useful way. Here, no, I'll wait on that. The quicker to understand will depend on how well we succeed in the presentation, I think. Because at the base level, it is easier to grok than like a PolitiFact article, but people also are very used to reading articles in that format, so it's something that is not necessarily difficult to understand while getting some level of nuance in it.
Yeah.
That one is very much a value, is not something that's necessarily going to be success.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a difference between quicker to understand for someone who is familiar with Golibot and quicker to understand for someone who isn't familiar with Golibot. And I'm using the term Golibot
Mhm.
loosely. Yeah, so right, when they come to the page, it may be like, what the heck is this? What does the score mean and all that stuff? So in that case, it's harder to understand. But once you get over the learning curve, the hope is that you could look at a score and at least understand where the debate is and at the top level. But yeah, initial. Yeah, I'll have to think about if there's a better way to phrase, quicker to understand once you understand the process. But I don't, hopefully we can also make it's easy to understand when you first come into it. But yeah, that may not be possible, or we may not be accomplished enough to that. Anything else?
Those are my main initial thoughts. There's some other things I'll do depending on implementation, but we talked about those a lot in the UX meeting already. So
Well, that's
don't need
good.
to rehash
I
those.
feel good that made a difference. As far as like what are the people going to get out of it? This I know that there's better ways to phrase this, so I'm just kind of like brain dumping, like something to share, like you have your crazy uncle and he said something and you just want to send him an article, and sometimes it's hard to find the right article and the articles always seem biased.
For me, it's more that the article is often more narrow that I'm looking for rather than an overall
Yeah, although I don't
coverage.
know that we'll be able to solve that right now, but yeah. Yeah, anyway, so this would be a nice resource to go to when it's like a complex topic and you don't want to sit there and argue with them, but you kind of want to just say, here's the YouTube video to watch. It is one of those, right? It's an explainer. And then I also think like sometimes you're having the debate with someone, except if that person is really up on it, you're intimidated and feel uncomfortable having the conversation because you don't have all the info at your fingertips, right? So I don't know how to say. It's kind of like you have a resource to go to more easily, quickly get to the sub facts that you need. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's the big question. We can't know how people will receive it until they are receiving it.
Yeah.
I suppose
And
another.
I mean, this might be where someone can use it and the other person doesn't even know they're using it. Like, let's say you're having an argument on Facebook and you're just like, oh, I need a resource to go to find all the arguments from my side to have this argument. Just being able to like go in and find it and copy and paste.
Yeah, having the point counterpoint already all laid out is pretty handy.
And then just as a way to avoid arguing, and maybe this is similar to something to share, is that maybe I'll put it under there. I don't know. Way not to argue. So it's kind of like go tell. This is only if it's actually Golding bot, but go tell Gelly what is wrong. And so like you don't even want to have the point counterpoint debate. It's just like go look in here and tell me what's wrong with
Mhm. Sorry, that just gave me a flashback of arguing with family about things and linking them or something directly answering the question, then them just completely ignoring it.
yeah, and
But we're not gonna be able to reach those people anyway.
yeah, that's going to happen. I think a small percentage of those people, if we make it, the percentage of people that we can engage will depend on the implementation. It may be just like 0.01% of the people that look at this article that disagree with the end results will actually go in and either learn something that they didn't know that'll cause them to doubt their side, or that they'll find a gap in our logic and give us feedback. My hope is that we'll get like 0.01% and then we'll get it up to 1% and then 2%. Just it being presented in a way that's not like, any of the media is just, you get the subject line, you in this the clickbaity article title is so one-sided that's kind of like, I'm not even going to read that article because you already called them illegal immigrants instead of undocumented. Oh, and then the debate, the project goals. We have a little time left, and these I once again just threw out again, but Max had suggested this. So it all I think comes down to kind of like surveying the people that are using the site. So
Mhm.
have a majority of people rate us low on bias. I don't know what that means yet. Regardless of their self-identified political affiliations. So one idea is like rank us with other sites and resources and be in the top 3. So like a conservative might prefer Fox News and they put Fox News here and they put MSNBC here. Hopefully we're like between those two, right? So that would be an interesting, and what in like majority and these things need to be defined more, but
Yeah,
some
and
sort
there
of measure that says people, how biased do you think we are, and have that.
yeah, there are sites that are committed to media bias rankings, and I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel there. We can try to take those metrics and aim for them ourselves.
Mhm. Well, I'd like to know what each individual thinks. So if I want to just actually quiz the people that are using the site. So after they look at it, how much did you kind of agree with? Well, like, I was thinking about actually having them listing out PolitiFact and Fox and MSNBC and having them rank it. Where would you fit it in here? If people do that, we'll see. Some other goals like get 10 social media shares from people we don't know. Get 1 social media share with someone that disagrees with the score. Of course, that assumes that we have some way of polling to see whether they agree with the score or not.
They pretty much have to say that I don't like the conclusion they reached, but they have a good summary of the argument or something.
Yeah.
Which not a lot of people are self-confident enough to post stuff like that.
Yeah. It may even be a win if they post a sub point in there and say, does anyone know about this? Like, here's a study, what's wrong with it, or something like that. I don't know. These are still just kind of brainstorms. One mentioned by a news organization, a social media influencer. How much is an influencer? I don't know. Someone with over X followers.
Mhm.
And then have one person identify that they changed their, let's say, opinion. I was reading our analysis. Actually, opinion is not right, because that kind of sounds like they flip-flopped. But I almost
Mhm.
want to ask them, here's a 5-point scale. How much do you agree with this statement? And so it'd be like completely agree, proven false, might be true, might be false. I don't know, right? And have them move one of the points from like definitely untrue to might be untrue.
Mhm.
So this all comes down to, we may have to implement something where they come in to the site and Gulibot says, here's the thing we're debating. Should you take the vaccine? If how would you rate it? And then Gulibot shows Gully's answer. And then at some point we try and get them to let us know if it changed their mind or not. And that may be a very low hit case, because people are just going to read it and close it, but it's a goal.
Yeah, I do think that any sort of feedback system is pretty low on our list of things to get done, at least built into the site.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to measure this, we're going to need it. But yeah, I'd rather get something up and running first, and then
Mhm.
it probably won't be that hard to do something. It just may not be very effective.
It's a hard thing to be effective at, because everybody wants to skip the feedback forums anywhere they are. So getting somebody to voluntarily engage with it's tough.
Yeah. But maybe we could get some metrics on social media shares, and it may not be as cut and dry as this. It may be like it'd be super if we did get a social media share where someone says, this changed my mind, right? But that's highly unlikely. It is possible. Like, I had a friend who's like, why would you buy an electric car? And I told him, I can run my electric car off gasoline, but you can't run your gasoline car off of my electricity. And they were like, oh, yeah, I guess that's a good reason. Like, regardless of your whole opinion on whether all this stuff works, it's whether there's climate change or not, it's just like, there's a valid reason to do it.
There are practical considerations regardless
Right.
of anything else.
When they were just giving an ideological answer. So, maybe that's what it is. We see if there's one tweet from someone that we don't know that says that it changed their mind. I mean, that would be a huge win, just one. Anyways, these are just kind of brainstorms, but that we can keep thinking of. So we'll probably discuss this a little. A little bit more on Tuesday, and I need to change that appointment.
Mhm.
But that's pretty much it. We could probably shut the meeting down early.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you got enough work and everything?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Like, I still need to go through and figure out how to reformat the previous debates to narrow them down. So
Okay.
that's a notable project that I have not begun yet.
Yeah. And then just hit me up if you hit any blockers. And are you gonna send me a bill soon? It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, I need to get around to that.
Yeah.
I'm at, let's see, about an hour today. About 33 hours their work. So I need to sign the contract too.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have a printer at home, so I'm gonna have to or edit it in there, but I can get that done.
Yeah, Adobe or Foxit Reader. The little
Fox it
thing.
more likely because I have
Yeah.
not paid for Adobe.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been using Foxit and putting my signature in there.
Mm.
Cool beans, man. Well, just hit me up if you need anything. And I appreciate all your work and all your feedback on this. It's been very enlightening.
Mhm. I'm glad that no matter what comes of it, we'll at least better understand the problem or where we get
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, even a failed experiment is a learning, right?
Exactly.
All right. I'll see you on Tuesday if I don't hear from you before.
See you then.